Okay, hi there, Dr. Matthew J. Traum here. Welcome back from your break. I like to give you guys a little rest every 15 minutes because I know it can be quite daunting and tedious to listen to hours and hours of continuous videos. So, anyway, thanks for coming back and helping me finish up this presentation on trade studies. So, where we were before, we had walked through the comparative section. Sorry, the comparative section, and we're now talking about the tally section of the trade study template. And we had basically made binary comparisons between the metrics, put in our decisions here, and then counted them all up to get these counts for metric 1, 2, 3, and 4, which are also represented by the letters A, B, C, and D. So that's where those numbers come from. And the last thing that we needed to do is come up with these percentages. So that's where we stopped. And where do the percentages come from? Well, all I'm doing is just taking the total number of cells here, which remember that value is 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And for your matrices, it's going to be different because you'll have a different number of matrices. Sorry, a different number of metrics. But ultimately, the number of empty cells is what you're counting, and that becomes the denominator. And then the numerator is the number of times a particular letter, a particular metric, shows up in the matrix. So this is simple math. You guys can do division. So I'm just going to show you one example here, but for the letter A, which corresponds to metric 1, I have 2 letter A's which show up. Right, here's 1 and here's 2. And so I'm going to take that 2 and I'm going to divide by the total number of possible cells, which is 6. And I'm going to end up with 33.33%. It's basically a third. And that value is going to go here in the percentage column on the tally side of my trade study matrix. And so here's kind of a sanity check, a milestone. Once you get all these values in there, so it's 33.3% for metric 1, which is A, 16.67%, which is metric 2, letter B, and so forth. All of those values need to sum to 100. So once you get this done, you sum up those values. If you get something other than 100, you've done it wrong, and you need to go back and check your math, do it over again. They must sum to 100 because there's only the total number of letters here is the total number of empty cells. And so if you end up with a number that's greater than or less than 100%, you've got more letters or less letters, fewer letters than you've got cells, right? So you made a mistake somewhere. Anyway, so once you've done that sanity check, you're done now both with the comparative section and the tally section of the trade study matrix. And we're going to move on now to how to generate those weighting factors that go into the down selection matrix. Okay, so what I've shown here is at least for one subsystem, right? You guys are going to have multiple subsystems, probably somewhere between 5 and 8, maybe to 9 subsystems for your designs. But for a single subsystem, I have just sort of artificially filled out both sides of the matrix for 3 different team members, team member 1, 2, and 3. And you guys are going to have somewhere between maybe 6 and 8 team members, so you're going to have a lot more of these matrices. So you guys are going to have to do a lot more math. But ultimately, this is just an exercise in bookkeeping, right? There isn't a lot of complex math here. It's just addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. So I sort of simulated this just for the sake of an example, but you guys are going to have each team member fill out their own matrix, one team member or one matrix per team member per subsystem. And then you guys are going to calculate the averages across the team values for each metric, which is what I showed on the previous slide, to come up with these values. And then ultimately, you're going to repeat this for each individual subsystem, right? So you guys are going to have subsystem alpha, subsystem beta, subsystem delta, and so forth. Each one of those subsystems is going to have a repeated version of this process until you get them all covered. Okay, so now how do we get the weighting factors? To get the weighting factors, I'm going to take each value created by an individual team member, and I'm going to sum them together with the individual values created by the other team members for a particular metric. So I'm going to get an average across the entire team. So I've given you all 4 of the letters. So here's A. Where do I get this value of A being 38.89%? Well, it's this cell, which is team member 1's value for A, plus this cell, which is team member 2's value for A, plus this cell, which is team member 3's value for A. So I take 33%, 33.3% from here, 50% from here, and 33.3% from here. Take the average of those, and that's where I get 38.89%. And then I do the same thing for the B's, the C's, and the D's, and I get these average values for each one of those letters corresponding to a metric. So that's where those values come from. And then what do you do with those values? Well, I've shown you guys this slide already. This was in the beginning. Remember, ultimately, the goal of the trade study is to determine the weight factors that go into the down selection matrix that ultimately will weight each quantitative metric. So those values, 38.89, 22.22, 11.11, and 27.28%, end up right there in this column. So here's 38.89, 22.22, 11.11, and 27.78. Now again, another kind of stop sanity check here. These values must also sum to 100, right? Because they represent the total kind of input from every individual team member. So provided each individual team member contributes to every matrix, which if you do, you get a sum of 100%. If your number is greater than or less than 100%, you've done something wrong. You have to go back and check the math. So that's basically how you fill out the weighting factor column in a down selection matrix. Now, in subsequent videos, we'll talk about actually doing the down selection process, but ultimately you guys are going to come up with normalized values for concept 1, concept 2, and concept 3, and then you're going to multiply that normalized value for each metric corresponding to each concept by the appropriate weight factor, and then you're going to end up with a weighted concept 1 value, weighted concept 2 value, weighted concept 3 value for each one of those metrics. And then ultimately you sum up those weighted concept values and you get a value down here, a number down here, and that number, the one that's the highest, is going to be, that's going to correspond to the concept that you will select out of that down selection matrix. So that's just sort of a preview of where we're going. Anyway, this is all I wanted to go through for this particular slide deck. So that brings us to the end. Thank you for your time and for your attention, and I look forward to seeing you guys in class. All right, thanks. Bye.